My talk is about reproducibility of resonance of matrix on the impact of different strategies for multiple comparison, correction, and sample sizes. So, okay, so as we talked about, so some people talk about there's a reproducibility crisis. So there are science paper and a nature paper, and there are lots of, in the neuroscience field, there are several wonderful reviews. For example, Barton et al. In 2013 talked about power failure. So small sample size undermines the reliability of neuroscience. And Dr. Ross' project also has a wonderful review towards transparent and reproducible neuroimaging research. So when we talk reproducibility, we should define reproducibility first. There's a pretty good measure called intra-class correlation coefficient, ICC. So this measure can tell us this metric should be kept stable within subject, but it should have some variance between subject. ICC is pretty good. However, our daily practice is if we test some effect, we have the significant results, we do multiple comparison correction, we have some blobs, and we tell these blobs correspond to this brain function, or these blobs has abnormal activity in the patients. So for this kind of supra-threshold voxels, we should find some way to define the reproducibility. For example, when we talk about the sex differences, we have the voxels showing sex differences, how they are reproducible in another scanning time, or how they are reproducible in another data set. And we also could talk about within subject design. For example, if we have as open as closed differences, could this be replicated in another data set? We should define this kind of reproducibility as well. And when we talk about reproducibility, there's a critical issue is thresholding. Some people already talked about that. So when you increase the threshold, the reproducibility drops. So, for example, if you have very strong threshold and no single voxel survives, then your reproducibility drops to 0. And talking about thresholding, I think most of you are aware of this paper by Dr. Eklund. So they're talking about a cluster failure where fMRI inferences for spatial extent have inflated false positive rates. So they tested the strategy for multiple comparison corrections, and for the most widely used methods, for example, if we set voxel p-value at 0.01, the family-wise error rate are very high, and only if you set voxel p-value at 0.001, or you use a permutation test, can attain acceptable family-wise error rate. So we need to talk about reproducibility and the balance with the family-wise error rate. So also another issue is the sample size. So people already talked about small sample size will undermine the reliability of neuroscience. And as Dr. Project reviewed, until 2015, the median sample size for single group studies is 28. And for multi-group studies, it's 19 per group. It's a very small number. So we would think about how the thing is, the small sample size for the reproducibility. So generally, for this study, we are talking about reproducibility of alpha matrix on the impact of different strategies for multiple comparison, correction, and sample sizes. We used the core data set. This data set led by Dr. Xinian Zuo, and they also scanned several times. So if we have a sex differences, we can test the first time difference, can they replicate in the second time? And we can also test if this kind of differences can be replicated in a totally different data set, for example, the FCP data set. And this we are talking about between subject differences, the sex differences. We would like to also examine the effects on within subject differences. For example, within subject as open as closed differences. And this, we have two different data sets, although each are small sample size. So we examine a broad array of resonance alpha metrics. They are most widely used, like amplitude of low frequency fluctuations, AFF, fraction AFF, regional homogeneity, degree centrality, or voxel-mirror homotopic connectivity. And when we And when we talk about a strategy to correct multiple comparisons, there are so many different methods, and there are so many different combinations. Even us, we have had a significant test. After that, we want to correct our results, and so many choices, and each give us different results. So which one should we trust, or which one should we report? So for example, we can have the Monte Carlo simulation, like alpha-knit 3D color sim, or an alternative DePapi alpha sim, or we can use Gaussian random field theory correction, GRF correction. But for each one, they have different combinations. For example, you can set a Vox p-value at 0.01, or Vox value at 0.001. And for cluster p-value, you can set 0.05. And another thing we should care is most of us are interested in the two-tailed effects. For example, you are interested in the patients higher than controls and the patients lower than controls. So if you are interested into two-tailed effects, you cannot just pretend, okay, I just correct one tail. So for each tail, you may need to control the cluster p-value at 0.025. So we also have some cluster accident correction with the permutation test, and a permutation test with a threshold-free cluster enhancement, the permutation test with TFCE, or with the Vox-wise correction, or false discovery rate. So there are so many different strategies for multiple comparison correction. And the first thing, we just want to replicate Dr. Eklund's finding, so evaluate the family-wise error rate. So Eklund et al., they used the resting state data, and they used some sham task regressors. If there is a task activation, then there is a false positive. So what we did is we used the FCP data set. There's a Beijing set. There's 106 females. All are very young females. So this is a very homogeneous group. So we randomly pick up 40 females, split 20 by 20, and we do a comparison. If there comes out a significant difference, then this is a false positive. So we permute it for 1,000 times so we can evaluate the family-wise error rate. Okay, so the results is pretty similar to Eklund result findings. So if for voxel level p-value with control at 0.01, the family-wise error rate are very high. So only if we can control the Vox p-value at very strict. So for here, if we are interested in the two-tailed effects, we should correct each tail. So for each tail, we should control at the Vox p-value at 0.0005, pretty small. And for the cluster p-value at 0.025. In this case, we can control the family-wise error rate under 5%. So this is, we should control that as that way. And all the permutation tests, including permutation tests with TFCE, can control this family-wise error rate and as well FDR correction. But still, we have still a lot of choices for multiple comparison corrections. They can control FWER under 5%. So to choose among that, we should use some other methods like reproducibility. So we can use test result reliability. So for the scan one, we have the sex differences, and we just want to know how the first time differences overlap with the second time. For the overlap, we can use death coefficient. So we use death coefficient to measure test result reliability. And it seems most of them are not too bad, but also not good. And they attain moderate test result reliability, and the ALF F ratio are better than degradation shortening and VMC. And there are so many different multiple comparison corrections, and they have different test reliability. So we can use a freedom test to see which one give us the best test reliability. Come on. Oops. Okay, so since that's one jump out, so the permutation test with TFCE is significantly higher money than others, and it achieves the highest test reliability. So this is test reliability. So we also look at if the differences can be replicated in a different data set. So we say that is replicability. And this is the central one. And also, this is the sex differences. We also wanted to see if these results keep the same for the within subject differences, for the as open as closed differences. Seems all these different comparisons, permutation test with the TFCE, it can control family-wise error rate under 5%, but the test result reliability and the replicability achieved the best. And another thing, we just want to test the sample size. So the influence of sample size on test result reliability, there is a SW4 site in the core data set. And so there's 116 males and 105 females. So for example, for sample size 30, we randomly pick up 15 males, randomly pick up 15 females. So we do a comparison, and for the session 1 and for the session 2, we do a comparison as well using permutation test with the TFCE. So we see how they overlap with each other. And then we can have a curve grow with the sample size for the test reliability. Well, this click. Okay, so here's the test result reliability. It increases with the sample size. But you will see for those sample sizes very small, like under 80, the test reliability is pretty poor. And we also look at on the sensitivity and the positive predictive value. So we have those voxels, they show significant differences for the call session 1, call session 2, and also in an FCP data set. So we use that as a gold standard. We can test the sensitivity. And okay, the sensitivity increases with the sample size and also the positive predictive value.
Sorry, can you hold it?
Hold it?
Yeah.
Okay. So actually, they are increased with the sample size, but for those with a very small sample size, the positive predictive value is very small, so it seems it doesn't reflect the true effect. Okay, so the permutation test itself seems can reach the best balance between FWER and the reproducibility, and not too much people using that. One is pretty strict. Second, maybe it's complex to use. So we integrated Dr. Winkle's PALM package into DPIB. Now it's just one click. You can have the permutation test with the TFCE results. And also we should pay attention if you are using one-tailed or two-tailed. So if you are interested in two-tailed effects, you should correct each tail. And also, so for those alpha indices, they retain moderate reliabilities, but the replicability is not good. And that's one thing we just want to note is for the as open, as closed difference, the sample size is small, but reproducible much better than the between subject sex differences. So since this is caused by the larger effect size, so maybe in the future we should prefer the design which has larger effect size, for example, using within subject design. And also for the studies, we should increase our sample size. For the small sample size, all the performance are pretty poor. So one step toward that direction, we launched the R-fMRI project. So we have a software called DPIB. There's a lot of users. So users use DPIB to use a standardized processing protocol, process the data, and share the final maps to the project. And this is shared to all the global researchers. And we already shared 5,000 subjects and downloaded by 600 researchers. And some people have already published papers. And as a reproducible study, so we shared all the maps of this study, and we also shared all the code in our GitHub. And one step further is we just want to show some other example in the field. We just want to do something in depression. I don't want to mention how important depression it is, but we just figure out using our software. Some people said this software is a second leading software in resting state field. So we identified our users who is doing the depression studies. We emailed them. We have some conferences. So they uploaded the standardized processed alpha maps to us. So we accumulated 1,300 MDD patients and 1,128 healthy controls is the biggest as for now. and it has 25 cohorts. So for this data set, we just did this is a sample characteristic. And we just did a very simple study here, because lots of people talking about depression has abnormal default mode network functional connectivity, the DMFC. Lots of people are talking about increasing, but some people are talking decrease. So we just use this data to test that. So we defined some default mode network nodes and using averaged the node between node active functional connectivity. So what we found is in this data set, we didn't find an increase of DMFC. However, we found a decreased DMFC. As a closer look, the first episode drug-naive patients didn't show any change, but the recurrent patients showed a decrease. This decrease is showed in recurrent compared to normal controls, as well as compared to first episode drug-naive. For the recurrent patients, there is maybe an effect, so maybe an illness duration effect or the medication effect. But we didn't find any illness duration effect, but we found a medication effect. But this is a pretty close measure, so we also look at the connection by connection. This yielded the same results. So I think I can show them more time. So basically, the summary is the balance between FWER and reproducibility. Computation test with TFCE may be a good choice, and we should increase our sample size to increase reproducibility. And I would like to, there's open data of MDD is coming soon, maybe later this year, through the R-fMRI project. And finally, I would like to thank my lab members, collaborators, and funding. Thank you very much.